my name is Kai Gidwani, and this is my presentation on terrain creation with Unity using Myth of Change as an example. Okay, so the agenda is I'm going to start with a sketch, then going into the rough shape, refining that shape, adding on textures, adding on details and foliage, and then continuing to refine that. Okay, starting with the sketch. The first thing you should be doing is creating a very basic sketch with just the idea of a game path and the basic story beats. Additionally, you want to add on your major landmarks so that you have the terrain to make. But very, very basic stuff. The above picture is the original sketch, whiteboard sketch of Myth of Change's terrain. We didn't have much landmarks in, but there was some things that we did have in mind here that just weren't pictured. The below image is something I drew for this presentation to kind of give an example of these first couple steps. Okay, so here we're going to do implementing the rough shape. Starting really from your sketch, you just get the game path in, but really, really unrefined, very basic stuff, not a lot of details. You want to have your landmarks marked out, but not very detailed at all. And using placeholders as needed. In Myth of Change, I used white cubes to really represent which locations we were going to have stuff at that we didn't have full models at yet. But you can really just kind of use whatever you have in your game scene. And then at this point, honestly, start testing it already. If you have a movement system, you can try to use that and see how that feels. But if not, you can start trying to use your game camera to like kind of fly around and follow your path and see like what the player is seeing and if they're seeing the things that you want them to see and the path you want them to take and everything's making sense. And then also at this stage, get feedback from your team and your peers on this before moving forward. Especially you want to start this early because if you like miss something where people are like, I don't like this XYZ and you need to make some big changes to this, it is so easy to do at this stage compared to later when you have a lot more details in. It is like a great idea to get your big changes out now if you can, but stuff happens as we'll get into. All right, next you want to refine the shape. Using playtest feedback to really change this up if you have any big tweaks to make. And then from there, also adding in your detail. So you start using smaller brushes with lower opacity, which is the like how much your brush gets applied. And start using your different shaped brushes, the things that aren't just the basic white circle and the like faded gradients. So things with these have these like weird maps to them that have like a interesting texture that really start to make your terrain have a different shape with more like texture to it without having any like actual texture applied to it yet. This will make a really huge difference once you actually start getting textured on there. From now it might not seem like a ton when it's just like it's white and gray squares, but it does make a really big difference on how genuine your terrain looks. Okay, also at this stage you can start adding in smaller landmarks like hills or maybe like little divots and other things that you might have going on. And then terrain stamps. Some tutorials will tell you to use a terrain stamp instead of hand drawing your terrain, but I found that really inhibits your creativity and kind of forces you to build your game around the terrain stamp instead of your terrain around your game. Your game experience really should be the first thing that you prioritize, not the way the terrain looks. Terrain stamps, although they have really high detail and look really good, I think they're much better for background elements and things that the player like might not interact as much with, or you not directly have like a set path that you need. Something where the shape of it doesn't matter so much as that it is there. Okay, now for texturing. You can texture the basic way using the same brushes that you did for sculpting. The same like shapes and the opacities of them are still there. Or you can do what I recommend and use texture layers with the procedural terrain painter plugin. For this is for Unity. Um, I don't think this exists in Unreal, but it might have its own version over there. Um, but this lets you do lots of different things for things with height and slope and flatness, and roundness is one of them. There's lots of different options you can choose from. But as you can see in these images here from Myth, we have things like snow caps that exist on multiple mountains at the exact same height, and I didn't have to like try to track that or anything. That was a very easy process. And then this rocky texture is only applied on slopes that are pretty steep. And it really adds a lot of shape and really highlights the texture that you already made with the brushes. And you can see like we're here on the flatter bits where there's more grass and dirt and sand versus the really rocky bits. And it really helps accentuate the shape that you already made. And you can actually, now going on to the details and foliage, you can actually use that shape and those textures to help you add more fine details, as the plugin will automatically update your textures based on your modeling. So the things will accurately update, so you can have a better view of what you're working on while you work on it. And it really helps you see what might need tweaking, what looks good already, that kind of stuff. Also at the stage, you can start adding in foliage. In Unity, there is a difference between tree foliage types and details foliage types. I would recommend, if you can, try to implement all of your assets as trees, even if they're not things like trees, if they're like grasses or bushes or rocks, or even things that you might not consider trees, like road signs or other types of like details that aren't quite like specific things. Things that can be repeated a bunch of times, basically, as like set dressing. The difference between the trees and details things, there's a lot of different details there that are very specific, but the main ones is that trees have LODs that can help with your game performance, and details sometimes have a bit of weirdness to them. Like if you see in Myth of Change, all of the grass is a detail type, and all of it, because of that, have a black line on top of it. You might not notice it when playing, but now that I've pointed it out, you probably won't be able to unsee it. Sorry. We spent forever trying to get rid of this black line, but it is like permanently part of it because it is a detail. When we tried switching it to trees, it did fix the problem. Unfortunately, that didn't get added into the end game, but that is, yeah, you can see that as part of an example of why details are sometimes weird, maybe to avoid it. All right, at this point, you want to start continuing refining, keeping up what you were doing before with playtesting, and using that playtest feedback to really change up and keep it updated. A big lesson was don't be afraid to kill your darlings. At the end of the first semester of Myth's development in Unity, we were getting a lot of playtest feedback that the game was too long and kind of boring. Even though we originally wanted this to be part of the experience, that you had to enjoy the journey and like find something to enjoy and to occupy yourself with the looks of the game, even though there wasn't much to interact with at that time between the large sections of just driving in the terrain. And we eventually decided the next semester to cut it down, change the entire path of the game to make it much shorter so people would have less time to become bored. We also added more features for people to interact with, but we did have to cut a huge amount of the terrain. As you can see, the top image is the before, and the lower images are the after, where the bottom right image really shows the different path between the top image and the bottom images, where you can see that there's now just a path to a different mountain that's much closer and the path is much shorter. Basically, the lesson here is although you spend a bunch of time on this, it really is important to have to kill your darlings, even if you really don't want to. Like I was, I was really sad to get rid of this terrain, but it was definitely the right decision for the game, and it is much better for it. Um, but yeah, this is a good feedback to keep in mind, unless if you, in case you need to change the stuff up. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.